Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, that kind of thing is the third part of my three-part bookshelf tour. So let's get into it. I'm going to, so I've done a previous video where I talked about crime and then another one on the horror books on my shelves. So these are all things that I haven't read or haven't reread since I reacquired them. Which I'm intending to read at some point soonish, but there's quite a few here, so how soon that will be I don't know. So today there's two halves to this video. So the first half is going to be like sci-fi fantasy, and then the second half is going to be kind of general fiction, and then the third half, because actually there's 3/3 not 2 halves, will be kind of thrillers and stuff like that, and a bit of historical fiction. So let's do sci-fi fantasy first. So there's quite a lot, as you often get with science fiction and fantasy, there's quite a lot of series in here. So let me go through in some sort of logical order. Actually, it won't be a logical order. I'll just go through them. Right, so first up, The Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. So I think there's 4 books in total in this series, and this is the first 2. I read these when I was a teenager and really loved them, but I don't think I ever read all 4 of them. So yeah, looking forward to reading these again. So this volume has The Shadow of the Torturer and The Claw of the Conciliator, a lovely yellow Victor Glantz 50th anniversary edition. And then I've also got, helpfully, the second book again in this older edition. So The Claw of the Conciliator, lovely old kind of slightly vintage sci-fi book there. Next up, so this book, Street Lethal by Stephen Barnes, I bought ages ago because I read a review of it or a reference to it online and it sounded good. So I ordered a copy from the States, a second-hand copy, not a huge expense, but it wasn't cheap. And it's sat on my shelves ever since, and I haven't read it. But it's got a really cool sort of late 80s cover. I don't know what it's about. Let me read you the back. I haven't been reading the back of these because if I did, I'd be here forever, but I'll read you the back of this one. Los Angeles is a war zone where life is cheap and plague-ridden ghouls stalk the streets. In the deep maze, the rotten core of a dying city, the word of the Ortegas is law. Aubrey Knight is a deadly human weapon. Born on the streets, trained as a zero-G null boxer, he was used by the Ortegas as an enforcer for their bloody empire of drugs, prostitution and black market body parts. Now Aubrey wants out, but nobody walks away from the Ortegas and lives. If he wants to survive, he'll have to become a hero. Crikey. Why have I never read this? That sounds awesome. Right, okay, that's going fairly near the top of my TBR, I think. Next up, another one of these nice 50th anniversary Glantz editions. So Hyperion by Dan Simmons, which again I've never read. So I talked about his book Abominable, or The Abominable, which is on my horror shelf. In my horror video. So yeah, this one is a book that people rave about, kind of space opera type thing, so see what that's like. This is one I picked up more recently, so the collected, do you know what, it's the collected horror stories of Robert E. Howard. I thought Robert E. Howard fantasy, so I put it in my fantasy pile. It's horror, sorry, should have been in the other video. Anyway, supposed to be very good. Howard, obviously a fantastic pulp writer, and this has got an absolute ton of short stories in by him, plus some nice illustrations. So looking forward to getting to that. Next up, what's it called? I can't remember what the trilogy is called. The First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. So I've picked up all 3 of these in a charity shop a while ago. So we've got The Blade Itself, which I think is the first one. Before They Are Hanged, and Last Argument of Kings. It was a bit of a theme I felt a lot in the crime video that I said a lot of times. I've also got these on my Kindle. I think I have also got these ones on my Kindle as well. But yeah, they're supposed to be really good, and I've got a couple of other paperbacks by him that are like standalone, so if I enjoy these, I will dig those out as well. But yeah, it's kind of heroic fantasy and has quite a good rep. Let's do another series. So we've got what's the series called? The Night Dawn trilogy by Peter F. Hamilton. Let's make sure I get them in the right order. So we've got The Reality Dysfunction, The Neutronian Alchemist, and The Naked God. So I'm definitely going to have to be in the mood for these because they're each over 1,000 pages. Yeah, this one's like 1,200 pages. I think they're all about 1,300 pages. So that's quite an undertaking when I get to those ones. A bit more sci-fi. So this one I have read before, but years and years ago. Ubik by Philip K. Dick. So I read absolutely tons of Philip K. Dick when I was a teenager. It probably warped my mind a bit. But yeah, I really love his inventiveness and, you know, the sort of craziness of his books. So looking forward to rereading that. Got this one, Cities in Flight by James Blish. I know nothing about James Blish at all, other than I'm fairly sure he wrote a few of the early Star Trek books, which I haven't read, but I'm sure I recognise the name from those. But this sounds quite interesting. It's kind of it's also, they've done the blurb on the back sideways, which is quite cool. It sounds really interesting. A startlingly imaginative vision of the Earth where spin dizzies, anti-gravity devices allow whole cities to lift from the Earth and become gigantic spaceships. So yeah, that looks interesting. The Once and Future King by T.H. White. So I've read the first, this is a trilogy. I've read the first one, which is, of course is The Sword in the Stone, and really, really love that. It's got a lovely, a bit like Tolkien, it's got a lovely kind of pastoral feel to it. Very English, but yeah, looking forward to reading I'll probably reread The Sword in the Stone, to be honest with you, to remind myself of it, and then read the next two in that series as well. So Arthurian Legend, obviously. Transition by Ian Banks, which I bought at Edinburgh Airport about 7 or 8 years ago. Still haven't read. You can tell that it came out a while ago because there was a free iPhone app that you could get that gave you extra content. I'll have to see if the iPhone app is still available. I doubt it. So Ian Banks, I've got couple of books by him, which I'll be talking about a bit later on in the kind of general fiction section. So he's a writer who I absolutely adore. So I first read his first book, The Wasp Factory, again back when I was a teenager, and was blown away by it. And I've read all of his early novels and some of his early sci-fi as well, and then kind of stopped reading him. But I've got quite a few that I haven't read, so I will be looking forward to digging into those. I've got some more in the attic I didn't get down as well, I think, that I haven't read. Yeah, he was certainly at one point, I probably would have called him my favourite author. And sadly, I had tickets to see him go and do, he came to the town I live in to do a reading of whatever book he was promoting at that time. And I couldn't go and I had tickets to go and see him. He was doing like a reading and then a Q&A and signing. And at the last minute, I had to go up to Scotland on business, so I couldn't go and see it. And then literally within a month, I think, it was announced that he had cancer and was dying. So it felt doubly poignant that I could have seen him and didn't manage to. So yeah, a great writer and you know, a great loss to British fiction, I think, as well. Okay, next up, I didn't really know how to classify this. I think it's kind of fantasy. So The End of Mr. Y by Scarlett Thomas, which again was a charity shop pickup. Don't really know anything about it. It's got lovely black coloured edges to the pages, but yeah, I think it's had pretty good press. So we'll see what that one's like when I get to it. And then finally, actually not finally, finally in that pile, The Two Towers and The Return of the King. So obviously books 2 and 3 of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So just finished the other day The Fellowship of the Ring, which I really, really enjoyed. So I will be reading probably both of these in January because keen to, well, obviously I know what happens next, but keen to read what happens next. Okay, standalone next, so Tiger Man by Nick Harkaway. So again, when I do the thriller section a bit later, Nick Harkaway, if you don't know, is John le Carré's son. So I read his book Angel Maker about 5 years ago and really, really enjoyed it. And then recommended this to my book club at the time as a book to read, and we all bought it and then none of us could get into it. So I will hopefully get into it this time. But yeah, certainly Angel Maker I thought was brilliant. Okay, next up, a couple of anthologies. So these are The Lost and the Saint by Dan Abnett, which are what must it be, books 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the Gaunt's Ghost series. of like their Space Marine type books. So I read the first 3 a year or 2 ago and really enjoyed them. So they're kind of full on action, really kind of two-fisted, quite pulpy feeling, but yeah, thoroughly enjoyable kind of adventure, future war stories. So excuse me, yep, so looking forward to those. They're both quite meaty as well, so they'll keep me going a while. Right, next up, the last 3 books in the Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events series. So The Grim Grotto, The Penultimate Peril, and The End. So I started reading this series of books with my son as bedtime stories a few years ago, a good few years ago, and I was really enjoying them. Clearly we got up to book 10 and he grew out of them. So I need to read the last 3 because I love them. I just think they're so witty and funny and entertaining and amusing. And I was a bit bereft when he said he didn't want to read them with me anymore. So I picked up the last 3 anyway. So I'll get to those at some point. And then finally, yes, it is finally, what's the series called? I can't remember. I cannot, and it doesn't say anywhere on them what they're called. Does it say on the edge? The Broken Earth series by N.K. Jemisin. So the 5th season, The Obelisk Gate, and The Stone Sky. So obviously these books are, very well thought of. Won multiple awards. She won the Hugo 2 or possibly even 3 years, wasn't she? But yeah, I've tried the 5th season a couple of times and I haven't managed to get into it. So I seem to be, having read some Conan recently, reading the Gore books at the moment, having read the first 2 Lord of the Rings books, and the first of the Wheel of Time books recently, I definitely feel like I'm getting more into sci-fi and fantasy than I have been for a long time. So I'm definitely going to give these another try, because people do rave about them. So we will see what I think. Right, I'm going to have to pause for a second here and just tidy up this pile of books and get the next pile of books to talk through. Right, okay, moving on then. So this is thrillers, always kind of thrillers and historical stuff and westerns. They've kind of felt similar, all adventure-y type stuff, I guess. So first up, I've got an absolute ton of Jack Reacher books. So if you've not read the Jack Reacher books, they're just very light entertainment and really good fun about this character, Jack Reacher, who travels around America, righting wrongs, basically. Interestingly, actually written by an English guy, but they really capture, I think anyway, if you're American you may disagree, really capture the feel of America, or certainly the way we think of America as portrayed in movies and things like that. Yeah, and I think the books are great fun. So I read the first few when they first came out back in the 90s, I guess, and then stopped reading them for a while, and recently got into them again and trying to kind of work through them in order, and have picked up a ton of them in second-hand bookshops. They're really popular over here, so they're very easy to pick up second-hand. And indeed, when you're on holiday, that kind of book when you're on holiday, some people who don't really read much tend to read on holiday. When you're on holiday, you see hundreds of Jack Reacher books, because he's one of those people that, just like a few years ago, every woman you saw on holiday was reading E.L. James. Every guy was reading Lee Child. So yeah, I've got a load of these to go through. So if you're not a fan of Jack Reacher, skip forward 30 seconds or a minute or two. Right, so I've got a hardback of Blue Moon, which was a Christmas present actually from my dad a couple of years ago. And then these are definitely not in the right order, but we've got The Midnight Line, One Shot. So yes, this being the movie tie-in edition, so obviously there was a lot of scandals, probably the wrong word, but a lot of discussion, shall we say, when Tom Cruise was cast as Jack Reacher, because Reacher's supposed to be like 6'4" or something like that. But I think there's a TV series coming soon. I can't remember what streaming service it's on, but I'm pretty sure there's a TV series. And I can't remember who they've got playing Reacher now, but he's certainly taller than Tom Cruise. I mean, who isn't? Make Me Worth Dying For. So easy are these to pick up second-hand in charity shops that when I went through my pile of them, or box of them I had in the attic, I did find I had a few multiples. So I will be passing with some at some point. The Hard Way, Nothing to Lose, which is an ex-library one. Right, getting through them. Bad Luck and Trouble. Persuader. 61 Hours. A Wanted Man. Night School. And The Sentinel. So this one is one of the more recent ones, and it's the first one where Lee Child actually stepped away from writing them, and it's his brother Andrew who's now writing them. So yeah, that's all the Reachers. So let's do some other thrillers. So I've got this horrible and quite dilapidated copy of The Manchurian Candidate by Richard Condon, so a movie tie-in for the more recent of the movies. So yeah, I don't like the edition very much, but the story, the book is supposed to be excellent. So looking forward to reading that at some point. What else have I got? The thrillers. Oh, I just found another Jack Reacher, so The Visitor. And then we've got a John le Carré. So I talked earlier about his son, Nick Harkaway. So Our Kind of Traitor by le Carré. I've got a ton of his stuff on Kindle as well. So yeah, looking forward to digging into le Carré a bit more. I've only read a couple of his books, but really, really enjoyed both of those. So we'll see what that's like. Another thriller, The Eiger Sanction by Trevanian, which is supposed to be fantastic. I've seen the 70s movie with Clint Eastwood, which was a lot of fun. So yeah, it's supposed to be a good old-fashioned adventure story. Then I've got a couple of these. So I've got in my TBR for December another one of these, but these are contemporary Second World War novels that have been republished recently. So I've got Squadron Airborne by Alston Trevor, and Patrol by Fred Majdalani, I think you pronounce that. So I think these are really nice editions, and I love the idea of them being, kind of rediscovered books about the Second World War that were written around the same time by, clearly by people who experienced the war firsthand. Another bit of history, so Post Captain by Patrick O'Brien. So I read the first of the Aubrey Veteran books month before last, I think, or maybe last month, and really enjoyed it. So this is the second of those, so good seafaring adventures. And now we get into westerns. So I've started getting into westerns again recently, particularly after reading all the Edge, or the Edge books that I've read. So I've picked up a few slightly more serious westerns as well. So Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, which obviously is, considered a classic and won the Pulitzer Prize. The Authentic Death of Henry Jones, which I think was recommended to me by Stark Holborn, the author, who writes kind of westerns and books that kind of blend westerns with other genres. If you've not read their books, they're absolutely fantastic, and I definitely recommend checking them out. But yeah, they said this was very good. Another kind of classic western, The Oxbow Incident by Walter Van Tilburg Clark. So this is a very highly regarded, slightly more literary western, I think. It's quite a nice old UK edition as well, from the Ayr and Spottiswood's Frontier Library. Also in the same series, you've got The Ordeal by Hunger, brackets Donner Party. Quite an interesting one to read. So yeah, that looks quite good. And then a couple of Elmore Leonard. So in the crime section of this, I talked about the crime video I did for this the other day. I talked about Unknown Man number 89, which was the first of Elmore Leonard's crime novels that I read. And obviously he's very well known as a crime novelist. But he started out writing westerns. So I've got the Complete Western Stories, which is all the short stories, I don't know how many there are in here, which he wrote for like pulp magazines basically. So yeah, 30 Western stories by Elmore Leonard in there. Oh, it's got a forgotten bookmark as well. That's quite cool. I always like it when you find these. It's a airline ticket for Mrs. Marion Knight flying on Air New Zealand. What's the date? Is that one here? 20th of December. Doesn't say which year. Yes, but flying from Auckland to Queenstown. So flying within Auckland? Is Auckland in New Zealand or is it in Australia? It's terrible. I'm going to get people from both those countries complaining. Anyway, she was flying between those two places just before Christmas. And in fact, I'm filming this on the 20th of December. That's quite a bizarre. That's quite a bizarre coincidence. Wow. Okay, that's really cool. I can leave that in there to remind me. So yes, I've got that one, and then I've got this Elmore Leonard's Western Roundup #1, which is I think three of his early Western novels. So The Bounty Hunters, 40 Lashes Less One, and Gun Sights. So again, these are supposed to be really good, and certainly his crime fiction is characterised by fantastic punchy dialogue and really good intricate plots, which I think both of which should work brilliantly for westerns. So right, that's the kind of thriller western / historical section of that kind of thing done. So I'm going to pause again, put these books away, and get out the final one. Right, I'm back. If you made it this far, thank you. Well done. It's been a long haul. Right, okay, so this is you'll be glad to hear, probably the smallest section. So this is the kind of general fiction and non-fiction section. Obviously, as the tagline for my channel would suggest, I'm all about genre fiction. So crime, horror, thrillers, westerns. That's my jam. So this is other stuff which I'm interested in reading, but which doesn't fit into those categories. So let's go through these quickly. Right, so start with Ian Banks. So this is one of his last novels, the Steep Approach to Garbadale. Is it Garbadale? Yes, The Steep Approach to Garbadale. So I talked a bit about him in earlier on in this video. And my love of his work, so looking forward to reading that one. I've got a couple of classics in here, or a fair few classics actually. So Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which I did try and read a while ago and just wasn't in the right mood for. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, which probably needs no introduction. As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner, which was a Secret Santa present a few years ago, which I did try and couldn't get into, so we'll try that again at some point. And Stoner by John Williams, which is one of those books that everyone who's read it raves about. So yeah, looking forward to that one at some point. Pedro Paroma by Juan Rulfo. So this was highly recommended by Juan at Plagued by Visions. I think he said it was his favourite novel ever. Unfortunately this edition of it, which I think is like a print on demand one, is just really nasty and not even properly aligned in places, but a classic Mexican novel, and yeah, as I say, highly recommended by Juan, so looking forward to reading that. Next up, The Wild Life of Sailor and Lulu by Barry Gifford. So this includes, I think this is a collection of, six short novels, well, I suppose you would call them novellas really, because the book's only 500 pages long. One of which is Wild at Heart, which obviously was famously filmed by David Lynch. I've read Wild at Heart before, but picked up this collected edition a while ago. It's also got in here Peruta Durango, which was also filmed. I'm trying to think who it was filmed by. Was it filmed by the Spanish guy who made Acción Mutante? I can't remember. But I remember the movie of that being quite crazy and over the top and enjoyable. So yeah, six short novels in there about Sailor and Lulu. If you haven't seen Wild at Heart, you should see it. But basically, they're a young couple who are madly in love, who go around doing crimes and stuff. They're a bit kind of Bonnie and Clyde, but cooler and a bit wild and that. Two books here by Mark Haddon. So I read his book, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time, which is a massive hit over here, certainly. I don't know if it was internationally. I read that when I was on holiday about 15 years ago and really liked it. And subsequently have picked up these two in second-hand bookshops. So A Spot of Bother and The Red House. So lovely covers on these, I have to say. I haven't read either of them, despite having loved the other one. So I'll get to those at some point. Next up, we've got three of the Flashman novels by George MacDonald Fraser. So these are books that, so my dad loved these books when I was a kid, which is kind of how I'm aware of them, I suppose. They're really entertaining kind of comic adventures about this guy Flashman, who is considered to be kind of a hero in the British Army in Victorian times, but is actually basically a bit of a waster. but they're very amusing and entertaining books. George MacDonald Fraser also, I think I'm right in saying, wrote the screenplay for Red Sonja, the Robert E. Howard adaptation and kind of Conan tie-in movie that had Bridget Nielsen and Arnie in it. So yeah, 3 of these. So we've got Royal Flash, which is the second one, Flash for Freedom, which is the third one, and Flashman at the Charge, which is the fourth one. Right, another set of 3 here. So the Corfu trilogy by Gerald Durrell. So I was aware of Gerald Durrell as a kid, and I think they even have read some of his kind of nature writing as a kid, but kind of was reminded of him again. So I don't watch much TV, but the TV show of the Durrells, which is based on these books, is just really gentle Sunday evening TV, and I absolutely loved it. So pick this up again. Again, as with other things, I do have this on my Kindle as well. But yeah, sort of kind of autobiographical books about his life as a young man growing up with his family, who had moved to Corfu when their father of the family dies. It's about them all kind of living, rubbing up against each other in this on this Greek island and trying to make ends meet. But yeah, in an idyllic surrounding, so that kind of clash of cultures thing as well. So yeah, looking forward to getting into that at some point. This one, Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont by Elizabeth Taylor. Not, I think, that Elizabeth Taylor, sadly. My mum bought me this and absolutely raves about it. I tried it and couldn't get into it at all, but she insists that it's very, very good. So I will try it again at some point. It's only short, so it's a good one to read for the 100-book challenge. It's less than 200 pages. So yeah, it was sort of a bit of a comedy of manners, so far as I could tell. But yeah, I didn't enjoy what I read of it, but we shall see. 2 here by Richard Adams. So Watership Down, obviously the most famous of his books, which obviously I've seen the film and I've eaten the pie, but I haven't read the book. But yeah, it's a nice old Penguin edition there, and also a similar edition of Shardik, his book about a bear, which funnily enough is referenced in The Dark Tower. I can't remember which book it's in. Is it in Wizard and Glass where they have the bear? In one of the Dark Tower books anyway, Shardik is referenced. Okay, this one is one that's on my list for my countdown challenge. So Shuggy Bane by Douglas Stewart, which everyone raves about, and my sister told me I had to read. So I have a copy of that and we'll be reading that soon. So I think a novel about growing up in Scotland. Another book about growing up. So Going Solo by Roald Dahl. So this is the second of his 2 books of memoirs. So the first being Boy, which I've read. So obviously, very well known as a children's writer and creator of Willy Wonka and so on. Also, fairly well known as a writer of adult, particularly short stories, so kind of short horror stories, which are fantastic if you haven't read them. But his memoirs are really readable and engaging as well. So I really enjoyed the first one, and we'll read this one soon. Again, I keep saying I'll get to that one soon, but clearly I won't get to all of them soon, but we'll see. Right, we are on to the non-fiction. So I've got Manhood for Amateurs by Michael Chabon. So I absolutely love The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. Somewhere, in fact, I'm surprised now that I haven't shown it to you, because I've just remembered I've got another shelf. I'll have to do a little wrap up at the end where I get the books from the other shelf. I've got another book for you somewhere to read. So this is his book about kind of fatherhood and being a man. So a non-fiction book, which I read the first couple of chapters of, and they were really good, and then put it down for some reason. So need to finish that. Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. Obviously his very well-known book about humanity and the evolution of human thought. The Reason I Jump by Naoki Higashida, which is a book about autism, which is supposed to be very good. And Human Universe by Brian Cox and Andrew Cohen. So I bought this, I can't remember exactly why I bought this, but I thought it would be an interesting book to read. Obviously Brian Cox is quite engaging. My wife really, really likes Brian Cox. I'm sure it's got nothing to do with the fact he's quite a good looking chap. But yeah, this looks like quite an interesting book. Oh, it's got nice illustrations and stuff as well, so I shall get to that at some point. Right, I'm going to have to pause again and just quickly get the books from my final shelf that I forgot about, which will be a complete mix of different things, so bear with me. Right, I've grabbed them. I will go through these in no particular order. So in theory, I suppose I could go back and insert the appropriate books into the previous videos, but I can't bother to do that. So yes, I'll just go through them. So first up, science fiction, Trauma 2020, book 2, The Crucifixion Squad. So I read this when I was about 13 or 14. It's like a really grim, violent novel about the terrible future that is 2020. The first book is called Urban Prey, so I reread that one at the start of 2020. This one I haven't got to yet, but it's about this guy called Beaky, I think, BK, who's trying to survive in this terrible kind of future London. And in this book, as the title suggests, there's this gang of people going around crucifying people he was trying to escape from. Next up, a thriller, so A Season in Hell by Jack Higgins, so classic British thriller writer. This one I think is about kind of the IRA and stuff like that. So I don't think I've read this one. I've read a fair few of his over the years, and he's usually pretty entertaining. A really awful movie-tied edition of The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. So I read this a few years ago, got it out of the library and read it and loved it so much. I decided a year or so ago that I had to have a copy of it so I could reread it. And for some reason it's quite difficult to get hold of over here. I don't understand why, so I ended up with this terrible movie-tied edition, but a fantastic book, obviously, so looking forward to read that again. Here we go, so this is the Michael Chabon book, which prompted me to remember about the Lost Shelf, so the Yiddish Policemen's Union, so Cavalier and Clay, I think I may have said, I absolutely loved. This is very highly thought of as well, so looking forward to reading that. This was another Secret Santa present. I think this was my work book club Secret Santa present last year, which I still haven't read. So what was it? Coffin Road by Peter May. So I've read a Peter May novel, his book about bird flu lockdown, which I really enjoyed, and I've got a ton of other things by him to read. Loads of stuff of his on my Kindle. So he's, from what I've read, he's very good, and he's very well thought of as a crime author. So I should get to that at some point. Next up, Stage Fright by Garrett Boatman, one of the Paperbacks from Hell reissues, which it's like really heavy. It feels much heavier than it should be, and the print's quite small as well. It's very dense, so I do struggle sometimes with small print having aging eyes, but fantastic cover. It's supposed to be quite a fun horror read. Let's try and theme this a little bit. Right, so let's do some more horror. So Beast by Peter Bentley. Peter Benchley, which is his giant squid novel. Who doesn't love a giant squid novel? So obviously most famous for writing Jaws. I read this years and years ago and liked it, so looking forward to a reread. Another one I've read before, By Reason of Insanity by Shane Stevens, so his epic serial killer novel, which I remember being really bleak and brutal and horrible. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that. A Simple Plan by Scott Smith. So I see The Ruins by Scott Smith, his second book, talked about loads on BookTube, but no one seems to talk about this much. I thought this was a brilliant book. I read it when it first came out, just really grim, and it's got that feeling of just inevitability about it. You know it's going to end terribly, but you just don't know how, and it just moves like a freight train towards that inevitable conclusion. So yeah, I rebought it in the last year or so with the intention of rereading. Crash by J.G. Ballard, which I shall definitely be reading in my countdown challenge, because this came out in 1973, which is my birth year. So famously filmed by David Cronenberg a few years ago. So a book about a couple who have sex with cars or something like that, I think. So yeah, looking forward to that. And then finally, this is a book I've been meaning to read for about 35 years, I think. So The Dice Man by Luke Reinhardt, so very well known book about a guy who makes all his decisions on the roll of a dice. So a very interesting concept, and yeah, I say I'll get to this at some point. I've had it, I've said I've been meaning to read it for 35 years. I've had this copy for probably 7 or 8 years and haven't read it. So me saying I'm definitely going to read a book soon is no guarantee, but supposed to be a good book. Right, we did it. My throat is sore because I filmed all of these videos in one go. I hope your brains aren't sore from watching them. But yeah, if you've got this far, congratulations, you've got real stamina. Yeah, thanks for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheerio.